The universe is old in a sense that exceeds ordinary reference points. Its age cannot be compared to memory or measured against a human lifetime. Roughly 13.8 billion years have passed since the beginning of cosmic history. That span establishes scale rather than urgency. It does not compress easily into ordinary intuition. That scale exists, whether it is considered or not. It remains constant. The number itself is less important than what it represents, a duration so vast that it changes how other durations can be understood. The vastness operates quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not require acknowledgement. It continues its presence regardless of attention or awareness. The scale remains what it is when time is that large. The usual sense of near and far begins to soften. The difference between yesterday and tomorrow, between last year and the next, becomes a fine texture laid across something much wider. Within that wider span, there is room for slow change. There is room for continuity that does not depend on attention. There is room for motion that does not hurry. This room is not empty space waiting to be filled. It is temporal breadth that already exists, that has always existed within the structure of cosmic duration. The breadth accommodates all that occurs without strain, without limitation. The width of time at this scale creates a different kind of space, not physical space, but temporal space, a kind of openness where pressure does not accumulate, where things can unfold without being compressed against one another. Temporal space has its own character. It does not crowd events together. It does not force connections that do not naturally exist. It allows processes to proceed at their own pace, governed by their own conditions rather than by external urgency. Years and decades, even centuries and millennia, become fine gradations when placed against billions of years. They do not disappear. They simply take their place within a much larger context. The larger context does not diminish the smaller durations. It simply shows their relationship to something greater. A year remains a year, but when 13.8 billion years extend behind it, and potentially ahead of it, the year becomes one texture among many textures of different scales. These textures overlap. They exist simultaneously. A single moment contains all of them at once. The moment is both immediate and situated within vast duration. Both aspects are real. Both are present. Light travels through space at a steady speed. It does not accelerate when distances are long. It does not slow when distances are short. And so, light that reaches Earth from distant galaxies has been traveling for most of the universe's history. It began its journey long before the planet formed, long before the sun took shape, long before familiar structures existed. It has continued without interruption, moving through space while countless other processes unfolded elsewhere. The journey of light is uninterrupted continuity. No gaps appear in its travel. No pauses occur in its motion. From emission to arrival, the light maintains its course through whatever conditions exist along its path. That light carries no urgency with it. It simply moves. The speed is constant. The direction is maintained. The journey continues whether or not it is observed. Constancy here refers to a fixed value. The speed of light remains the same across circumstances, independent of source and destination, and consistent across space and time. The constancy of light's speed creates a reliable relationship between distance and duration. This relationship does not change. It operates the same way across the entire observable universe. Reliability here means predictability. The same relationship holds everywhere. What is true at one location is true at all locations. What operates in one era operates in all eras. The consistency is universal. Because light moves at a finite speed, Distance and time are linked in a quiet, consistent way. The farther away something is, the older the light that arrives from it. Looking outward into space is also looking backward into time. This is not a metaphor. It is a simple consequence of how light travels and how vast distances can be. Distance becomes time. Time becomes visible as distance. The two are inseparable at these scales. They are different aspects of the same relationship. Inseparability is a basic feature of structure at cosmic scales. It does not depend on observation, and it is not produced by measurement. It reflects how such systems are organized. When light from a distant galaxy reaches Earth, it carries information from when that galaxy was younger. The galaxy as it exists now is not what is seen. What is seen is what it was when the light began its journey. This creates a layering of time and observation. The present moment of seeing contains light from many different moments of emission. Some light left its source recently. Some left billions of years ago. All of it arrives now, but all of it began then. The now contains multiple thens simultaneously. Telescopes collect that travelling light. They do not alter it. They do not retrieve it from the past. They simply receive what has already been on its way. In that limited physical sense, telescopes function as time machines. They make earlier states visible. They allow the present moment to receive information that began long before the present existed. The light arrives now, but it began then. Both moments exist in the same observation. The present and the distant past meet in the act of seeing. This meeting is not dramatic. It is ordinary in cosmic terms. It happens constantly. Everywhere light travels through space and eventually reaches something capable of receiving it. The ordinariness does not reduce the fact of it. It simply places it within the normal operations of the universe. This can be held without intensity. It does not need emphasis or drama. Light travels steadily. Distance is large. Time is embedded in that distance. The idea completes itself without requiring further interpretation. Completion here does not mean ending. It means the concept is sufficient as it stands. Nothing more is needed to make it valid or real, without elaboration. The steadiness of this process provides a kind of reference, not a reference that needs to be checked, but one that simply exists as background constancy. A quiet continuity that does not announce itself. Background constancy operates without attention. It continues whether noticed or not. Its presence is reliable precisely because it does not depend on being observed or considered. It simply is. Light that left a distant star millions of years ago arrives tonight. The star may no longer exist. The light continues regardless. The journey is independent of both the source and the observer. Independence here is absolute. The light does not require the star to continue existing. It does not require an observer to complete its journey. It moves through space according to its own nature, unaffected by what came before or what might come after. Time can feel undivided. Sometimes it moves as a continuous motion, and moments blend instead of separating. The flow remains steady and calm, without any need to count or measure it. It continues quietly, carrying everything forward. Cosmic time does not fragment. It does not create divisions unless they are imposed from outside. Left to itself, it flows without interruption. One state leads to the next without gaps or boundaries that would separate them absolutely. The absence of gaps means continuity is complete. What was flows into what is flows into what will be. The transitions are smooth, not because they are forced to be smooth, but because nothing interrupts the natural progression. This framework does not require observation to exist. It operates whether anyone measures it or not. It is a description of how the universe maintains continuity across vast scales. Continuity at this level is patient. It does not rush toward any destination. It does not delay for any reason. It simply proceeds according to the conditions that govern cosmic processes, conditions that remain stable across time. Within that flow, the universe expands. Expansion here is not an event in a particular location. It is not something happening from a center that can be pointed to. Space itself stretches over time, and as it stretches, distant galaxies move farther apart. This change occurs on timescales so large that no single moment within it feels like motion. Within a century, within 1,000 years, even within many millions of years, the difference is imperceptible. Imperceptibility does not mean absence. The expansion continues even when it cannot be directly observed from within brief spans. The process is real, ongoing, constant. It simply operates at a scale that exceeds immediate perception. The expansion is so gradual that it appears as stillness when viewed from within any brief span. Motion exists, but it unfolds too slowly to register as change from moment to moment. Only when viewed across immense durations does the movement become apparent. Here, apparent means detectable. The motion becomes detectable after enough time has passed. Detecting it does not produce it. Detection only makes an ongoing process easier to recognize within a human lifetime. The expansion itself is difficult to observe directly. Distances are vast and the rate of change is slow, yet expansion continues regardless of the scale at which it is measured. The independence of cosmic processes from human perception is absolute. The universe does not adjust its operations based on what can or cannot be observed from any particular vantage point. It proceeds according to its own nature. In cosmic time, processes of this kind are ordinary. They are treated as part of how the universe continues, without urgency or exception. Ordinary cosmic processes do not require special conditions. They do not depend on rare alignments. They happen constantly, everywhere, as the normal state of existence at cosmic scales. Neutrality here is not indifference. It is the absence of preference built into the fundamental operations of reality. Things happen as they happen, governed by consistent principles, rather than by intent or direction toward particular outcomes. And so, the continuation proceeds with a neutral character. It allows different rates without privileging any one of them. The unfolding follows conditions that remain consistent across vast reaches of space and time. The processes that govern expansion remain consistent over time. They have the same character today as they did billions of years ago. Consistency across billions of years demonstrates stability at the deepest level. The rules that govern cosmic processes are not temporary. They are not subject to drift or decay. They persist as fundamental features of how reality operates. This persistence creates reliability. The same principles that operated at the beginning continue to operate now. What was true then remains true now. The continuity of physical law provides a foundation that does not shift beneath the processes it governs. There is also a way to hold vast time in a more compact form. The cosmic calendar is a model that compresses the entire history of the universe into a single year. It does not change what happened. It only changes the scale at which it is represented, so that relative timing becomes easier to sense. Compression is a tool for understanding, not alteration. What occurred still occurred. When it occurred still defines its relationship to other events. The calendar simply translates vast durations into more familiar units so that proportions become visible. The calendar is a tool for proportion, not precision. It shows relationships between durations rather than exact measurements. It allows patterns to become visible that would otherwise be too large to perceive. Visibility of pattern is the calendar's purpose. It makes the otherwise incomprehensible comprehensible by changing scale without changing truth. The relationships it reveals are real relationships, just displayed in a form that human perception can grasp. By compressing billions of years into months and days, the calendar makes it possible to sense how events relate to one another temporally. What came early? What came late? What intervals separated major formations? And thus, a calendar clarifies temporal relationships by showing sequence and spacing. It provides a framework for when events occurred relative to one another, without interpreting their significance. In this model, the beginning of the universe is placed at the start of the year. The months that follow represent long spans. Days represent tens of millions of years. Seconds represent hundreds of years. The calendar is not meant to evaluate importance. It is meant to show proportion. Proportion reveals scale in a way that raw numbers cannot. A billion years as a number is abstract. A billion years as 4 months on a calendar becomes something the mind can hold. The translation makes vastness accessible without reducing it. When compressed this way, the year becomes a container for everything that has occurred, not a judgment of what matters, but a framework for sensing scale, a way of seeing how different durations relate to one another. The container is conceptual, not physical. It holds events in relationship, showing how they are spaced across time. The spacing reveals patterns of clustering and separation, showing when activity concentrated and when it spread out across longer intervals. The compression does not reduce the reality of what happened. It only changes the scale at which it is viewed. A billion years remains a billion years, even when represented by a month on a calendar. Reality persists beneath representation. The model is not the thing modeled. The calendar shows proportions, but the actual durations it represents continue to exist in their original form, unchanged by how they are displayed. On this calendar, the Milky Way begins to form around May. The sun appears in early September. All of recorded human history occupies the final seconds of December 31st. This placement does not reduce anything. It simply shows how different spans relate to one another. The relationship is one of scale. Human history is real, substantial, meaningful within its own frame. But when placed against the full span of cosmic time, it occupies a vanishingly small portion. Both truths coexist. The significance within one frame and the smallness within another frame are both accurate descriptions. And in this way, time becomes something we measure rather than something we inhabit. The calendar places events in relation to one another without altering what they are. The relationships become visible when scale is compressed. What seemed immense in isolation can be seen in proportion to something even larger. Proportion does not diminish. It contextualizes. An event that seems vast when considered alone can be genuinely vast and simultaneously small when compared to something of greater scale. Both perspectives are valid. Much of the year passes before anything resembling familiar structures appears. The early months contain processes that do not produce planets or stars. Matter exists in forms that do not yet assemble into recognizable patterns. The early universe is unfamiliar in its contents. The conditions do not support the structures that will later emerge. Yet those early conditions are necessary. They set up what comes later, establishing the foundations that will eventually allow more complex organization. The cosmic calendar can be held gently. It does not need to be used to draw conclusions. It can remain present as a background lens, showing that there are scales where time is wide and patient, where change unfolds without pressure. Patience at cosmic scales is structural, not intentional. The universe does not choose to be patient. It simply operates according to rates determined by physical processes that unfold across vast timescales. The patience is a consequence of scale, not a quality imposed from outside. Within the calendar framework, certain months are dense with change. Others are relatively empty of major transitions. The density varies not because some periods are more important, but because the conditions for certain kinds of change require specific preconditions that take time to develop. And in the quiet progression of things, this unfolds without urgency or intention. The emergence of preconditions is itself a process. Before stars can form, matter must cool and collect. Before planets can form, stars must exist to provide the gravitational centers and the heavier elements. Each stage enables the next. The sequence is not arbitrary. It follows from physical necessity. Physical necessity operates without preference. It does not intend outcomes. It simply makes certain sequences possible and others impossible. The possible sequences are the ones that actually occur. And in that long, quiet span of time, the calendar only marks what was already unfolding. When the calendar shows the sun forming in September, it reflects how much of the year had to pass before conditions allowed for our solar system to emerge. The passage was not waiting. It was the time required for galactic structure to take shape. Sufficient development means meeting the conditions necessary for the next stage. The galaxy had to reach a certain state before solar systems could begin forming within it. The reaching took billions of years. Those years were not empty. They contained the gradual processes that built towards sufficiency. And when you step back far enough to see it clearly, all of recorded human history, occupying only the final seconds of December 31st, comes into proportion. Thousands of years of human experience, compressed into moments, reveal how recent our presence is within cosmic time. What appears immense when viewed alone becomes brief when placed against the scale that contains it. Recency does not imply insignificance, it simply shows timing. Humans are a late development in cosmic history. That lateness is a fact about when conditions became right for human existence, not a judgment about importance. The final seconds contain everything humans have recorded, everything known from written accounts, from historical records, from preserved knowledge. All of it fits into seconds when measured against the full year of cosmic time. Fitting into seconds is a statement of proportion. It shows scale relationship. The actual content of those seconds remains as rich and complex as it ever was. Compression into a smaller representation does not compress the actual experience. Before those final seconds, much occurred that made them possible. The calendar shows this by displaying the long preparation, the early months, the middle months, the late months before the final day. All of it necessary for the final seconds to contain what they contain. Necessity links the stages. Each period creates conditions for later periods. The early universe creates conditions for galaxy formation. Galaxies create conditions for star formation. Stars create conditions for planet formation. Planets create conditions for complexity. Complexity creates conditions for life. Life creates conditions for consciousness. Each transition requires what came before. What came before is not just temporal precedence, It is causal foundation. Earlier stages do not simply occur before later stages. They make later stages possible. The making is not intentional. It is the natural consequence of how processes unfold when given sufficient time and appropriate conditions. Appropriate conditions develop gradually. They are not present initially. They emerge as the universe evolves, as matter organizes in increasingly complex ways, as energy disperses and concentrates in particular patterns. Patterns that support complexity are rare compared to patterns that do not. Most configurations of matter do not produce stars or planets or life. The configurations that do are special in the sense of being uncommon, not in the sense of being preferred by the universe. The universe does not prefer anything. It allows what physical law permits. Some of what is permitted leads to complexity. Most does not. Both outcomes are equally allowed by the underlying rules. When the cosmic calendar shows events in proportion, it reveals this pattern of gradual enabling. The long early period sets up the later period. The later period actualizes possibilities the early period created. The sequence is continuous. Each moment leads to the next. The calendar makes the continuity visible by showing the whole span at once. Showing the whole span reveals connections that individual moments hide. Seen moment by moment, the connections between distant times are invisible. Seen across the entire span, the connections become apparent. Early events shape later events in ways that only become clear when the full sequence is viewed together. Viewing together is what the calendar enables. It places all events in relationship. The relationship shows pattern. The pattern shows how the universe moves from simpler states to more complex states through the accumulation of small changes across vast time. Small changes across vast time create accumulations that would be impossible within brief spans. A process that produces minimal effect in a year can produce substantial effect in 1,000,000 years. The scale of time available determines what kinds of transformation become possible. And such transformation at cosmic scales proceeds through persistence rather than intensity. Changes appear subtle from moment to moment, but they accumulate over long durations. Cumulative change reflects the interaction of time and rate. Even a slow rate produces a large total when enough time is available. Over sufficiently long spans, the mathematics is straightforward. This conclusion follows from scale and duration. Profundity here is not mystery. It is the recognition that time as a resource operates differently at different scales. What is impossible in a human lifetime becomes inevitable given billions of years. Inevitability at cosmic scales emerges from the combination of probability and duration. Events with low probability per unit time become virtually certain when enough time passes. Rare occurrences become common when viewed across sufficient span. Viewed across sufficient span means adopting a temporal perspective wide enough to see patterns that brief observation misses. The wide view reveals regularities that the narrow view cannot detect. The cosmic calendar compresses this wide view into manageable form. It allows the patterns of cosmic time to become visible within a framework human cognition can hold. The compression serves understanding without distorting truth. And when we try to understand without distorting what is true, the scale itself can feel counterintuitive. At cosmic distances, what seems still is often in motion. What appears permanent is temporary. What seems separate is, in fact, connected. Visible temporal relationships show how events are linked across time. The linking is causal. Earlier states create conditions for later states. Later states inherit properties from earlier states. The inheritance creates continuity even as transformation occurs. Continuity and transformation coexist. They are not opposites. They are complementary aspects of how systems evolve. Something can change substantially while remaining recognizably itself. The self that persists is not a fixed essence, but a pattern that maintains coherence across change. Coherence across change is what defines identity at cosmic scales. The universe remains the universe even as its contents transform. Galaxies remain galaxies even as stars within them form and die. The persistence of pattern allows identity to continue, even as components change. And when you step back far enough, something else becomes clear. Things shift slowly. Small movements pass almost unnoticed. Details change, soften, and rearrange themselves in the background, one after another. And still, everything feels held together. Pieces come and go in their own time, while the larger shape remains steady, quiet, and intact. Components change while the pattern itself persists, and it's this quiet continuity that allows complex systems to remain stable over time. The parts are not permanent. It's the organization of those parts that creates stability, something that endures beyond any single piece. Individual components come and go, moving through their own cycles, while the larger structure remains. Individual components are temporary. Atoms cycle through different structures. Energy flows through different configurations. Matter assembles and disassembles. Yet patterns can persist across these changes, maintained by processes that continuously recreate the pattern even as materials flow through it. Materials flowing through persistent patterns create dynamic stability. The stability is not the stability of a static object, it is the stability of a maintained process. The process continues, the pattern persists, the identity remains even as the substance changes completely. Completely changing substance while maintaining pattern is common in nature. Rivers maintain their form while water flows through them. Organisms maintain their structure while atoms cycle through them. The examples are everywhere once the principle is recognized. Recognition of this principle changes how persistence is understood. It is not about permanence of parts. It is about continuity of organization. What matters is pattern, not substance. Pattern, not substance, means form takes precedence over content. The specific atoms are less important than how they are arranged. The arrangement creates properties that atoms in isolation lack. Lacking in isolation means properties emerge from relationship. Individual components have their own characteristics, but when components combine in particular ways, new properties appear that were not present in the separate parts. Not present in separate parts means genuinely novel. Emergence is not just a different perspective on what was already there. It is the creation of something new through organization. The new properties are real additions to reality. Real additions to reality means not reducible to prior states. The emergent properties cannot be fully explained by listing component properties. They require understanding how components interact, how their relationships create what their separation prevents. When things are kept apart, something subtle is lost. Connection changes what's possible, movement begins, space softens. Something that wasn't there before starts to take shape, slowly and quietly. And in that gentle shift, what once felt distant becomes part of the moment. And in that moment, the difference becomes clear without needing to be named. What is here now is real. What has not yet formed is real in a different way. What is potential could exist given appropriate conditions. The transition from potential to actual occurs when conditions change. to allow what was merely possible to become realized. Things don't appear all at once. They take shape slowly, gathering what they need along the way. Time passes, energy moves, conditions settle into place. And in that steady unfolding, what once existed only as possibility becomes something real. What could be becoming what is describes cosmic evolution. The early universe contained potential for stars, for planets, for life, for consciousness. These potentials were real even when not yet actualized. Their actualization required time for conditions to develop that would allow their realization. Realization of cosmic potential occurs through stages. Each stage creates conditions for the next. The sequence is not predetermined in the sense of being inevitable in detail, but it is constrained by physical law in ways that make certain broad patterns likely. Likely patterns emerge from the interaction of law and chance. Physical law determines what is possible. Chance determines which possibilities actualize. Together they create a universe that is neither purely random nor rigidly determined. Neither random nor determined means occupying middle ground. Order exists, but is not absolute. Contingency exists, but is not unlimited. The combination creates a cosmos that unfolds in ways that are partly predictable and partly surprising. Predictable and surprising are both valuable. Predictability allows understanding. Surprise prevents understanding from becoming complete. Together they maintain the conditions for ongoing discovery. Discovery doesn't come to an end. Each answer opens something new. One question leads gently into the next. The process keeps moving, unfolding forward, without reaching a final stopping point. Each generation builds on previous work while opening new domains for investigation. New domains emerge as tools improve and perspectives expand. What was invisible becomes visible. What was inaccessible becomes accessible. The expansion of knowable territory continues as capability develops. Capability developing means the boundary between known and unknown shifts. The shift is progressive, more becomes known, but the unknown does not diminish, it transforms. New questions replace answered ones. Answered questions do not end inquiry, they redirect it. Each answer is also an opening. Understanding one aspect reveals other aspects not yet understood. The process is generative. Knowledge creates more questions than it resolves. Questions multiply because reality is structured in layers. Each layer reveals new phenomena. Each phenomenon invites investigation. The layers are not separate. They are nested. Understanding one requires understanding its relationship to others. And such nested layers form hierarchies of organization. Lower levels enable higher levels, while higher levels exhibit properties that lower levels lack. The relation between levels is not simple addition. Organization transforms what the components can do. Transformation occurs when components combine. The combination creates something qualitatively different from the sum of parts. Water is not merely hydrogen and oxygen added together. It is a new substance with properties that emerge from how hydrogen and oxygen bond. And with that, bonding creates relationship. Relationship enables properties. The properties are real even though they exist. Only when the relationship exists, remove the relationship and the properties disappear. Disappearance of emergent properties, when organization breaks down, shows they were truly emergent. They depended on structure. They were not hidden in components waiting to be released. They were created by organization. Created by organization means genuinely novel. The universe becomes richer as organization increases. New levels of reality emerge that were not present initially. The enrichment is cumulative. Cumulative enrichment describes cosmic evolution. The universe starts simple and becomes complex. Simplicity gives way to complexity through stages of increasing organization. Each stage builds on previous stages. Previous stages provide the foundation. Stars form from hydrogen and helium. Stars create heavier elements through fusion. Heavier elements enable more complex chemistry. Complex chemistry enables more intricate structures. The progression is stepwise. Stepwise progression means each step requires the previous step. The sequence cannot be scrambled. Earlier stages must complete before later stages become possible. Time enforces the sequence, and over time, this sequence shows why order matters. What comes first shapes what comes later. The history of a system influences its present state, and the present state constrains what futures are possible. Constrained futures are not predetermined. Constraints limit options without specifying outcomes. Many possibilities remain within those constraints. Which possibility becomes actual depends on conditions and chance. Conditions set the stage. Chance selects among the available options. Conditions and chance interact to determine outcomes. Conditions set the stage. Chance selects from available options. The selection is not random in the sense of being unconstrained. It is random in the sense of not being predetermined. Not predetermined means genuinely open. The future is not fixed. Multiple possible futures exist. Which future becomes actual is not settled until it occurs. The openness is real. Real openness means the universe is creative. It generates novelty. New combinations appear. New patterns form. The creativity is not conscious. It is the natural result of how possibility space is explored through time. Over vast amounts of time, possibilities are tested. Some continue. Others fade away. What remains is not chosen with intention. It just simply lasts. This process isn't deliberate, but it is effective. Effective selection shapes what exists. What persists is what works under prevailing conditions. The working is not perfection. It is adequacy. Adequate solutions survive. Inadequate solutions do not. Survival isn't something that is given. It is what continues when everything else falls away. Systems that maintain themselves continue. Systems that fail to maintain themselves cease. The difference is not about value. It is about stability. Stability allows persistence. Unstable systems dissolve, stable systems continue, and continuation allows further development. Development requires time. Time only persists for what remains. What persists accumulates changes. The changes are usually small. Accumulated over long duration, small changes produce large transformations. The transformation is gradual, but its eventual magnitude can be substantial. Substantial transformation from gradual change is how complexity develops. No single step is dramatic, but the cumulative effect of many steps creates outcomes that differ drastically from starting points. Starting points do not determine endpoints. They constrain pathways. But within constraints, many destinations are possible. The path taken depends on sequence of changes, each responding to conditions at that time. Conditions at each time include the accumulated effects of all previous changes. History matters. The present inherits the past. The inheritance shapes what is possible now. What is possible now is broader than what was possible initially. Complexity has increased. More options exist. The expansion of possibility space is itself a product of cosmic evolution. Cosmic evolution creates conditions for its own continuation. Each stage enables further stages. The enabling is not intentional. It is structural. How things are organized determines what can happen next, but what happens next is constrained, not specified. Those constraints come from physical law and from the current organization of the system. Contingency operates, outcomes are not certain, but neither are they arbitrary. Not arbitrary means governed by conditions. Those conditions do not dictate outcomes. They influence probabilities. Some outcomes are more likely than others. That likelihood reflects how well outcomes fit their conditions. Fit between outcomes and conditions determines persistence. Good fit produces stability. Poor fit produces dissolution. The selection is passive. It is not imposed from outside. It emerges from interaction between system and environment. Maintaining conditions requires stability at multiple levels. If deep foundations shift, structures built on them become unstable. Stability of basic physical law allows reliable construction of complex systems. These systems and their surroundings affect one another. Each responds to the other over time. Nothing here is passive. Both are always in motion. One moment leads into the next. The process continues as long as energy is present, and as long as the structure can hold, that continuation isn't guaranteed. It depends on the conditions that support it. Complex systems depend on reliable foundations. That reliability does not make complexity inevitable. It simply makes complexity possible, and that possibility only becomes real when conditions allow it. Conditions favoring complexity include energy flow, material diversity, and sufficient time. Energy flow drives organization. Material diversity provides options. Sufficient time allows exploration of possibilities. Exploration of possibilities is not a systematic search. It unfolds through variation, filtered over time by what survives. What works tends to persist. What fails gradually disappears. This filtering is not optimization. It is survival. And survival does not mean perfection. It simply means being good enough under the conditions that exist. The change requires ongoing adaptation. Ongoing adaptation is continuous process systems that can adjust, persist longer than systems that cannot. The adjustment is not conscious. It is the result of variation and selection. Operating over time means across many cycles. Each cycle tests current organization against current conditions. Success in one cycle enables participation in next cycle. Failure in one cycle ends participation. Participation in ongoing cycles allows accumulation of successful adaptations. The accumulation creates increasing fit between system and environment. The fit is never perfect, but it can improve. Improvement is not progress toward a goal. It is a better match between what a system is and what its conditions require. That matching is dynamic. Conditions change, systems change. The relationship between them adjusts over time. And that adjustment creates feedback. That feedback, in turn, shapes what comes next. Each state affects what comes next. The affecting is not control. It is influence through constraining possibilities. Constraining possibilities shapes but does not determine outcomes. Wide possibility space narrows to smaller range. Within that range, multiple options remain. Which option actualizes depends on immediate conditions. Immediate conditions include both predictable and unpredictable factors. Some factors follow from prior states in regular ways. Other factors introduce variation that was not predictable from prior states alone. Unpredictable variation is not lawlessness. It is sensitivity to details too small to track. Tiny differences in initial conditions can produce large differences in outcomes. The amplification makes long-term prediction impossible, even when short-term prediction is reliable. With that in mind, short-term prediction relies on the current state strongly shaping the near-term state. This influence is sufficient to make the next state reasonably foreseeable. Over longer spans, however, small uncertainties accumulate and eventually make reliable prediction impossible. Impossible prediction does not mean random evolution. It means evolution too complex to foresee in detail. Broad patterns may remain predictable, while specific outcomes remain uncertain. The dual character of predictability and unpredictability is inherent. Inherent means built into the structure of how things evolve. It is not a limitation of knowledge, it is a feature of reality. Even perfect knowledge of current state would not guarantee perfect prediction of distant future. Perfect prediction is impossible, not because information is lacking, but because future is genuinely open. What has not yet occurred is not yet settled. The settlement happens through actual process unfolding in time. Unfolding in time means future becomes present through transition. The transition is not simply revelation of what was already determined. It is creation of what was previously only potential. Previously only potential means not yet real. Potential has its own kind of reality. It is real as possibility, not yet real as actuality. The transition from possible to actual is genuine becoming. Genuine becoming adds to what exists. The universe does not merely rearrange fixed elements. It creates new states that were not present before. The creation is continuous. Continuous creation describes ongoing cosmic evolution. Each moment produces next moment. The production is not repetition. It is transformation. What was becomes what is through process that adds novelty. Novelty is not randomness. It is new organization. New patterns emerge. New relationships form. The emergence and formation are constrained by what precedes them, but not entirely determined by what precedes them. Not entirely determined means partial openness. The past constrains the future without fixing it completely. The constraint provides continuity. The openness provides creativity. Creativity and continuity balance in cosmic evolution. Too much continuity produces stagnation. Too much creativity produces chaos. The balance maintains conditions where both stability and change coexist. Coexisting stability and change allow systems to persist while adapting. Persistence requires stability. Adaptation requires change. The combination allows systems to continue through changing conditions. Change happens at every scale. Cosmic expansion shifts spatial relationships. Stars evolve. Galaxies change. Planets cool. Surface conditions shift over time. These changes are constant, and they shape the conditions in which systems must adapt. Constant change creates environment where adaptation is necessary. Systems that cannot adapt eventually fail to maintain themselves. Systems that can adapt have potential for long-term persistence. Long-term persistence requires continuous adjustment. The adjustment is not occasional response to crisis. It is ongoing process of maintaining fit between system and environment as both evolve. Both evolving means neither system nor environment is static. Each changes. Each responds to the other. The mutual response creates co-evolution where neither can be understood in isolation. Understanding in isolation misses the relationship. The relationship is often what matters. Most properties that appear inherent to a system may actually emerge from how systems interact with environment. This interaction with environment shapes how systems develop. The shaping is not one-directional. System also shapes environment. The bi-directional influence creates complexity that single-direction models miss. Single-direction models are simpler but incomplete. They capture some aspects while missing others. Complete understanding requires recognizing mutual influence between system and environment. Mutual influence creates feedback loops. The loops can be stabilizing or destabilizing. Stabilizing loops maintain current state. Destabilizing loops drive change. Both types are necessary. This is necessary because systems need both stability and flexibility. Too much stability prevents adaptation. Too much flexibility prevents persistence. The combination allows systems to maintain identity while responding to change. Responding to change without losing identity is a fundamental challenge. The response must be substantial enough to matter, but constrained enough to preserve continuity. The balance is dynamic. Dynamic balance means continuous adjustment. The adjustment is not seeking equilibrium, it is tracking moving target. Conditions change, appropriate response changes. The tracking continues without termination. Without termination means ongoing. The process does not complete. It continues as long as system exists. The continuation is not tedious repetition. It is varied response to varied conditions. Varied response to varied conditions prevents simple prediction. Each situation is unique in details. The uniqueness makes each response specific to that situation. General patterns exist, but specific instances vary. Specific instances varying, while general patterns persist, describes multiple levels of organization. At one level, everything is unique. At another level, categories and patterns appear. Both levels are real. Real at different levels means reality is layered. Lower levels show details. Higher levels show patterns. Neither level is more real than the other. Both are aspects of same reality viewed at different scales. Different scales reveal different features. Fine scale shows variation. Coarse scale shows regularity. The features at each scale are genuine. They are not artifacts of perspective. They are real properties that exist at different levels of organization. Different levels of organization are connected. What happens at one level affects other levels. Lower level changes can alter higher level patterns. Higher level patterns can constrain lower level behavior. Constraining lower level behavior from higher level seems paradoxical. How can pattern constrain its own components? The constraint is real. It emerges when components form relationships that limit individual freedom. Limited individual freedom in organized systems is normal. A water molecule in liquid water cannot move independently. It is constrained by relationships with surrounding molecules. The constraint creates properties like surface tension that isolated molecules lack. Properties that isolated molecules lack appear when molecules organize. The properties are collective. They exist at level of organization, not at level of components. The existence at organizational level is genuine. Genuine existence at organizational level means emergent properties are real. They are not merely convenient descriptions. They have causal power. They influence outcomes. Their reality is demonstrated by their effects. Effects of emergent properties can be substantial. Temperature is emergent property of molecular motion, but temperature affects whether reactions occur. The higher level property constrains lower level processes. Higher level constraining lower level creates circular causation. Lower level enables higher level. Higher level constrains lower level. The circularity is not vicious. It is how complex systems maintain themselves. Maintaining themselves requires both bottom-up and top-down causation. Bottom-up causation creates higher levels from lower levels. Top-down causation shapes lower levels through higher level patterns. Both operate simultaneously. Operating simultaneously means not sequential. The causation flows both directions at once. The flows create integrated system where levels continuously affect each other. When different parts influence one another, a kind of order begins to take shape. It isn't imposed. It forms naturally. Through interaction, over time, those interactions settle into patterns. The parts remain distinct, but they begin to move together. What emerges isn't uniformity, it's coherence, a way of holding together without losing difference. Unity from multiplicity does not mean uniformity. Unity does not mean everything becomes the same. The parts remain distinct, but when they interact, something new begins to form. The whole becomes more than the sum of its parts, not because anything is added from outside, but because the way the parts relate begins to matter. On their own, components have their own qualities, but when they come together in certain ways, new qualities appear. These new qualities were not hidden before. They arise through connection. In that sense, relationship itself is creative. It brings something into being that did not exist before. It does not merely reveal what was hidden. It creates what was not there. The creation is real addition to reality. Real addition to reality means ontological emergence, not just epistemic emergence when new knowledge appears. Ontological emergence when new being appears. New properties come into existence that were genuinely absent before. Something new appears only after certain conditions come together. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds over time. When the conditions are right, change becomes possible. When they aren't, nothing new takes hold. In that way, emergence depends on circumstance. It isn't guaranteed. It happens only when the moment allows it. Something can exist without being guaranteed. It depends on circumstance, on what is present, on what conditions allow. That doesn't make it unreal. It simply means its existence is tied to the moment. Most things are like this. They exist when conditions support them and fade when those conditions change. Existing necessarily would mean existing regardless of conditions, but most phenomena require specific conditions. Remove the conditions and the phenomena disappear. The conditionality does not reduce reality. It specifies the kind of reality. Kind of reality matters because different kinds have different properties. Necessary existence is unconditional. Contingent existence is conditional. Most actual existence is contingent. Contingent existence means depending on something else. The dependence creates relationship. Everything that exists contingently exists in relationship to what sustains its existence. What sustains existence can be simple or complex. Simple sustaining might be single condition. Complex sustaining might be network of mutually supporting conditions. Most actual systems have complex sustaining conditions. Some systems rely on only one or two conditions. Others depend on many things working together. When support comes from multiple directions, something interesting happens. The system becomes more flexible, but also more exposed. A single failure can matter, but it doesn't always end everything. Other pathways can take over. Other supports can carry the load. That is what gives complex systems their resilience, not immunity, but the ability to absorb disruption and continue. Compensation for local failures makes complex systems robust in some ways. The robustness is not absolute. It is conditional on redundancy and flexibility. When redundancy exists, single failures need not be catastrophic. Not catastrophic means system can absorb disturbance. The absorption may require adjustment, but not dissolution. The capacity to adjust while maintaining identity is crucial for persistence. To keep going, a system has to do two things at once. It has to hold its shape, and it has to be able to bend. If it becomes too rigid, it can't respond when conditions change. If it becomes too loose, it loses what makes it itself. What works is movement between the two, a steady ability to adjust without falling apart. That balance isn't fixed. It shifts as conditions shift and the adjustment never really stops. Dynamic balance is not static equilibrium. It is ongoing process of adjustment. The adjustment tracks changing conditions. The tracking is continuous response, not occasional correction. Continuous response means never settled. The system is always adjusting. The adjustment is not problem to be solved. It is normal operation. Lack of need for adjustment would indicate static conditions, which rarely exist. Cause and effect existing at more than one level makes these properties emergent. At one level, events follow physical interactions. At another, they follow chemical ones. At another, they unfold thorough living systems, and all of these levels operate at the same time. Each one matters in its own way. Conditions being truly static is rare, because the universe is always in motion, expansion continues, stars evolve, planets change. These shifts shape the environments that systems must live within, and in those changing conditions, anything that cannot adapt eventually falls away. Failure of static systems in dynamic environments shows adaptation is necessary for long-term survival. Systems that cannot change eventually encounter conditions they cannot withstand. The encounter ends persistence. Ending persistence means dissolution. The system ceases to exist as integrated whole. Components may persist, but organization dissolves. Without organization, there is no system, only scattered parts. Scattered parts lack properties of organized system. The properties were emergent. They depended on organization. When organization breaks down, the properties disappear. Their disappearance confirms they were genuinely emergent. Genuinely emergent means not reducible to parts. The properties could not be predicted from examining parts in isolation. They appeared only when parts combined in specific ways. The appearance was creation of new reality. When organization appears, something new becomes possible. Not because anything magical was added, but because parts began working together in a new way. As organization increases, the universe doesn't just get more complex, it gets richer. There are more ways for things to exist, more ways for patterns to form. Early on, there were fewer levels of structure. Over time, more layers appeared, and with each new layer, new kinds of properties emerged. More kinds of properties mean more ways of existing. Matter can exist as individual particles. It can exist as atoms. It can exist as molecules. It can exist as cells. It can exist as organisms. Each level adds new properties. New properties at each level are real additions. They are not just different descriptions of same thing. They are different things with different causal powers. The powers are real because they produce real effects. Real effects demonstrate reality of emergent properties. If properties were merely conceptual, they could not cause anything. But emergent properties do cause things. Temperature affects reaction rates. Beliefs affect actions. The causation shows the reality. Cause and effect existing at more than one level makes the properties emergent, with some causes operating at the scale of particles, some unfolding through chemistry, while others appear through living systems, and all of these operate at the same time. None of them cancel the others. Each one contributes in its own way. Real simultaneously means not competing for ontological status. All levels exist. All have causal efficacy. Understanding requires considering all relevant levels, not reducing to single level. All of these levels exist at the same time. Each one matters. Each one shapes what happens in its own way. If we look at only one level, we miss part of the picture. Physics shows one side, chemistry adds another, biology adds more, psychology adds still more. None of them cancel the others. Together, they fill in the whole. Multiple levels create complexity. The complexity is not confusion. It is richness of reality. Reality has many aspects. Each level reveals some aspects while obscuring others. Obscuring others does not mean those aspects are absent. It means they are not visible from that level. Different levels foreground different features. Complete understanding combines insights from multiple levels. Combining insights requires integration. The integration is not simple addition. It is synthesis that shows how levels relate. The relationships between levels are, themselves, important aspects of reality. Important aspects that relationships reveal include how levels enable each other. Lower levels provide substrate for higher levels. Higher levels organize lower levels. The mutual dependence creates integrated hierarchy. Integrated hierarchy is neither purely bottom-up nor purely top-down. It is both simultaneously. The simultaneity creates coherence across levels. The coherence allows system to function as unified whole while maintaining distinct levels. Distinct layers can exist within a unified whole. This may sound paradoxical, but it is how complex systems are structured. Unity does not require uniformity. It requires integration. Integration preserves differences while creating coherence. Creating coherence from differences is fundamental to organization. Random collection has no coherence. Organized system has coherence. The coherence emerges from how parts relate. The relating creates pattern. Pattern is what organization creates. Pattern is what gives system its character. Pattern is what persists even as components change. Pattern is what makes system recognizable as itself over time. Over time means through change. Pattern persisting through change is dynamic stability. The stability is not of substance but of form. Form can remain while substance flows through it. Many natural systems hold their shape while their material flows. Rivers do this, flames do this, living organisms do this. What stays the same is the pattern, not the substance. The pattern continues because the process continues. This kind of stability is not static. It is maintained through constant motion. A static object persists by staying unchanged, while a living system persists by changing in ways that preserve its form. That maintenance is active. It is not passive. Active maintenance distinguishes living from non-living. Non-living systems can be stable, but that stability is passive. Living systems must actively maintain themselves. This maintenance requires continuous energy input. This continuous energy input drives processes that counteract decay. Left to themselves, organized systems tend toward disorder. Maintenance reverses this tendency locally. That reversal requires work. Work requires energy. Energy must flow through system. This flow drives processes that maintain organization. Without flow, organization degrades. That degradation is inevitable without active maintenance. Inevitable degradation without maintenance shows organization is unstable equilibrium. It persists only as long as processes actively sustain it. These processes must continue. Their continuation depends on available energy. The energy available determines what kind of maintenance is possible. More energy allows more complex maintenance. Less energy limits complexity. This limitation is not absolute boundary, but practical constraint. Practical constraint means complexity requires energy, budget. That budget determines sustainable complexity. Systems cannot maintain complexity that exceeds their energy supply. The supply becomes limiting factor. Limiting factor constrains what is possible. Within constraints, multiple options may exist, but the constraints themselves define boundaries. Systems cannot exceed boundaries set by fundamental limits like energy availability. Energy availability varies across space and time. Regions near stars have more available energy. Regions far from stars have less. This variation creates different conditions for organization. Different conditions favor different kinds of organization. High-energy environments favor complex but fragile organization. Low-energy environments favor simple but robust organization. Neither is universally better. Universally better would require a single criterion, but multiple criteria exist. Complexity, robustness, efficiency, adaptability, all matter. Different conditions favor different combinations. This variety creates diversity. Diversity of organization types reflects diversity of conditions. That reflection is not exact copying, it is adaptive response. Each type represents solution to challenges of particular environment. The challenges of a particular environment shape what succeeds. Here, success means persisting long enough to propagate a pattern. Propagation allows the pattern to continue even when an individual instance does not. The individual instances are temporary. Patterns can persist longer than instances. This persistence occurs through reproduction. Reproduction creates new instances of same pattern. That pattern continues through succession of instances. Succession of instances over time allows patterns to outlast materials. A species can persist for millions of years, while no individual lives that long. The pattern survives through continuous replacement. This process of continuous replacement requires reproduction. Reproduction copies pattern into new materials. That copying is rarely perfect. Variations occur. These variations create diversity within pattern. Diversity within pattern provides raw material for selection. Different variants perform differently under prevailing conditions. Better performing variants become more common. Worse performing variants become less common. This differential reproduction shapes future population. Shaping future population through differential reproduction is evolution. Evolution requires variation, selection, and inheritance. Variation creates differences. Selection filters differences. Inheritance propagates selected differences. Propagating selected differences over many generations produces adaptation. That adaptation is not intentional. It is cumulative, result of selection operating on variation. The result can be exquisite fit between organism and environment. Cumulative selection over vast time can produce apparent design without designer. The process is mechanical, but the results are sophisticated. Sophisticated results from mechanical process show intelligence is not required for complexity. Complexity can emerge from simple rules operating over long time. The emergence is gradual. Each step is small, but accumulated steps produce dramatic transformation. Dramatic transformation from small steps describes both evolution and cosmic history. In both cases, simple beginnings lead to complex outcomes through accumulation of changes. The pattern is similar despite different mechanisms. Similar patterns at different scales suggest general principle. Complexity builds gradually through succession of stages. Each stage modifies what previous stage created. The modification can be small locally, but large cumulatively. Large cumulative change from small local changes is how systems evolve. The evolution is not progress toward predetermined goal. It is exploration of possibility space, constrained by physical law and environmental conditions. Environmental conditions select among possibilities. What fits conditions persists. What does not fit conditions disappears. The selection is ongoing. It operates continuously as conditions change and systems vary. Systems varying means not all copies are identical. Variations arise through multiple mechanisms. Errors in copying create mutations. Environmental effects create modifications. Recombination creates new combinations. The variety ensures population contains differences. Differences within a population provide the basis for selection. If all individuals were identical, selection would have nothing to act on, so variation is essential for evolution. This variation is not directed toward improvement. It arises without regard to fitness. Random with respect to fitness means variations arise without regard to whether they help or harm. Most variations are neutral or harmful. Few are beneficial. But few beneficial variations over many generations can produce significant adaptation. Significant adaptation changes how organisms relate to environment. Better adapted organisms survive and reproduce more successfully. Their patterns become more common. Over time, population becomes better fitted to environment. Fitted better to environment is a measuring against alternatives under current conditions. When conditions change, current adaptations may become maladaptive. The judgment of fitness is relative to conditions. Relative to conditions means fitness is contextual. What works in one environment may fail in another. The context dependence makes fitness temporary. As environment changes, fitness landscape changes. What was peak becomes valley. What was valley becomes peak. Changing fitness landscape creates moving target. Adaptation is pursuit of target that never stops moving. The pursuit continues without end point. There is no final perfect adaptation because conditions continue changing. Continuing change means adaptation is ongoing process, not achievable goal. The process does not terminate. It continues as long as variation and selection operate. The continuation does not require progress. It only requires change. Change without progress describes evolution accurately. Evolution does not aim for improvement. It responds to current conditions. The response is not planning. It is automatic consequence of differential reproduction. Differential reproduction shaped by environment creates adaptation over time. The shaping is passive. Environment does not intend outcomes. It simply filters. What survives, filter becomes more common. What fails, filter becomes less common. Becoming more or less common changes population composition. The change is evolution. Evolution is change in population over time. The change can be slight or dramatic, depending on strength of selection and amount of variation. Amount of variation determines speed of evolution. More variation allows faster response to selection. Less variation slows response. The speed is not constant. It varies with circumstances. Variance with circumstances means evolution is not a uniform process. Sometimes it proceeds rapidly, sometimes slowly, other times dramatically, and still other times the change is minimal. All a normal evolution. Normal evolution includes both gradual change and rapid change. The pace depends on conditions. Stable conditions favor gradual change. Changing conditions favor rapid change. Both occur in nature. Both occurring in nature shows evolution is a flexible process. It operates under varied conditions. It produces varied outcomes. The variety reflects variety of situations where evolution occurs. Situations where evolution occurs include all contexts where reproduction varies by traits. The contexts are diverse. They include biological evolution. They also include cultural evolution and technological evolution, and many other domains. Other domains where evolution-like processes operate show evolution is general principle. It applies wherever variation, selection, and inheritance exist. The specific mechanisms differ across domains, but general pattern is similar. General pattern appearing in diverse domains suggests deep principle. The principle is that systems change through interaction between variation and selection. The interaction operates across levels and contexts. It is not limited to biology. Not limited to biology means evolution is broader than biological evolution. Cultural practices evolve, technologies evolve, languages evolve, ideas evolve. In each case, variation and selection shape outcomes over time. In general, over time, outcomes accumulate into traditions, technologies, linguistic structures, and conceptual frameworks. These accumulations are collective and extend beyond what any single individual produces. They reflect the combined contributions of many people across generations, which creates temporal depth in cultural development. Current states inherit from past states, and earlier states provide foundations for present possibilities. This inheritance is not only passive reception, it also functions as an active foundation that both enables and constrains what can occur next. Enables and constrains are both true. Past work enables current work by providing tools and knowledge. Past work constrains current work by establishing frameworks and assumptions. The dual role is inherent to cultural continuity. Cultural continuity links generations. Each generation receives inheritance from previous generations. Each generation modifies inheritance before passing it forward. The modification is both preservation and transformation. Preservation and transformation occur simultaneously. What is valuable persists. What needs adaptation changes. The judgment of value and need varies by context and perspective. The variation creates diversity in how traditions evolve. How traditions evolve shows cumulative cultural process. Early contributions establish foundations. Later contributions build on foundations. The building is not simple addition. It is creative elaboration that can transform original contributions. Transforming original contributions while preserving core features is how traditions maintain continuity through change. The continuity is not rigid preservation. It is flexible maintenance of identity that allows growth. Allowing growth while maintaining identity presents a structural challenge. Rigid preservation limits adaptation. Radical transformation disrupts continuity. Maintaining continuity through change depends on selective preservation and selective modification. What to preserve and what to change is not always obvious. Different periods favor different choices. The choices shape how traditions evolve. The development is path-dependent. Early choices influence later possibilities. Later possibilities are constrained by earlier choices. The constraints are not absolute. They can sometimes be overcome. But overcoming requires work. Following established paths is easier than creating new paths. Paths that require less effort tend to be selected more frequently, and repeated selection influences how cultural patterns develop over time. Repeated use increases the prevalence of some pathways while decreasing the prevalence of others. Over time, this process concentrates activity around a narrower range of approaches. The concentration of activity around particular approaches varies in its effects, depending on conditions. In some contexts, the approaches that become prevalent function effectively. In other contexts, concentration limits variation and can stabilize approaches that are less effective. Assessing the effects of this concentration requires examining its consequences across different conditions and over time. Examining outcomes across time provides information about how convergence functions under different conditions. In some contexts, established approaches continue to function as intended. In other contexts, secondary effects emerge that were not initially evident. These secondary effects become apparent as consequences accumulate over extended periods. Consequences accumulating over time can transform situations. What seems stable becomes unstable. What seems sustainable becomes unsustainable. The transformation shows that evaluation must be ongoing. Ongoing evaluation is necessary because conditions change. What works under one set of conditions may fail under different conditions. The changing context requires reassessment of solutions. Reassessment of solutions can lead to change or reaffirmation. Change when solutions no longer fit. Reaffirmation when solutions remain appropriate. The decision requires judgment informed by understanding of both principles and circumstances. Understanding both principles and circumstances is difficult. Principles abstract from details. Circumstances consist of details. Applying principles to circumstances requires interpretation. The interpretation is not mechanical. Not mechanical means requiring judgment. Judgment cannot be reduced to algorithm. It requires weighing multiple considerations. The weighing is informed by experience, values, understanding. Different people weigh differently. Different people weighing differently creates disagreement. Disagreement is normal when complex judgments are required. The disagreement can be productive or destructive. Productive when it clarifies issues, destructive when it prevents cooperation. Cooperation despite disagreement is possible when shared goals exist. The goals provide common ground. The common ground allows work together despite differences. The collaboration can be more effective than isolated individual efforts. Individual efforts have limits. One person can accomplish only so much. Collaboration allows division of labor. Different people contribute different skills. The combination produces outcomes beyond individual capability. Beyond individual capability means genuinely collective. The outcome is not what any individual could produce alone. It requires coordination and integration of contributions. The coordination itself requires work. Work of coordination increases with number of contributors. Simple collaboration requires little coordination. Complex collaboration requires substantial coordination. The coordination cost can become limiting factor for large groups. In general, large groups facing coordination challenges develop structures. These structures distribute work, authority, and information. This distribution allows large groups to function despite coordination costs. Coordination cost limiting group size shows scale matters. Small groups operate differently than large groups. The differences are not just quantitative, they are qualitative. Different scales have different dynamics. Different dynamics at different scales mean principles that apply at one scale may not apply at others. Understanding requires recognizing scale dependence. What is true at small scale may not be true at large scale. Not being true at large scale does not make small scale truth false. It makes it local. Local truths are valid within their domain, but they do not generalize beyond their appropriate scale. Appropriate scale is determined by what factors dominate. At small scales, certain forces dominate. At large scales, different forces dominate. The shift in dominant forces creates scale-dependent behavior. Scale-dependent behavior means same system acts differently at different sizes. A drop of water behaves differently than an ocean. A single cell behaves differently than an organism. The difference is not just magnitude, it is kind. Kind of difference means qualitative change. New properties appear at larger scales. New dynamics emerge. The emergence shows that scale is not neutral dimension. It fundamentally affects system character. System character changing with scale shows why understanding requires considering multiple scales. Single-scale analysis misses scale-dependent phenomena. Complete understanding requires examining system at various scales and understanding how scales relate. How scales relate is often hierarchical. Smaller scales compose larger scales, but larger scales are not merely sum of smaller scales. Organization at larger scale creates properties that smaller scale lacks. Smaller scale lacking properties of larger scale demonstrates emergence again. Each scale has its own properties. Lower scales enable higher scales, but do not fully determine them. The partial determination leaves room for scale-specific phenomena. Scale-specific phenomena are real features of reality at that scale. They are not illusions. They are not mere conveniences of description. They have causal efficacy at their scale. The efficacy is demonstrated by effects they produce. Effects they produce influence both their own scale and other scales. Same-scale effects shape dynamics at that level. Cross-scale effects influence other levels. The multi-scale causation creates integrated system where scales continuously affect each other. Affecting each other across scales creates complexity. The complexity is intentional. It is organized interaction between levels. The interaction follows patterns, even though patterns may be difficult to discern. Difficult to discern does not mean non-existent. Many patterns become visible only with appropriate tools and perspectives. What seems chaotic at one view becomes ordered at another view. The revelation shows importance of multi-scale analysis. Multi-scale analysis reveals patterns that remain hidden in a single-scale view. It enables recognition of what was already present. This recognition changes understanding without changing reality. Understanding can change without altering reality. Recognition of patterns does not create the patterns. Understanding does not bring phenomena into being. What is real continues being real whether understood or not. Whether understood or not means existence is independent of comprehension. Things exist before they are known. They continue existing if knowledge is lost. The independence is fundamental. Reality does not depend on being recognized. Not depending on being recognized means reality is self-sufficient. It maintains itself without requiring acknowledgement. The maintenance is automatic, built into how things are, not contingent on awareness. This self-sufficiency is characteristic of objective reality. It is the same whether observed or unobserved. The sameness is not assumption. It is demonstrated by consistency. Things behave the same way when no one is watching as when they are watched. When no one is watching as when watched, shows observation is not what creates regularity. Regularity exists independently. Observation reveals it but does not produce it. The revelation changes understanding, not reality. Understanding changing while reality remains constant shows knowledge is about discovery, not creation. Learning reveals what already exists. It does not bring new things into being. The discoveries are real because their objects were real before being found. Before being found means pre-existing discovery. The patterns were there. The relationships were there. The structures were there. Discovery makes them known. It does not make them exist. Making them known is different from making them be. Existence and knowledge are separate. Most of reality exists without being known. The vast majority of what is real has never been observed, never been measured, never been recognized. It continues regardless. Continues regardless shows reality is robust. It does not require attention to persist. It does not need observation to maintain coherence. The coherence is intrinsic, not imposed from outside. Intrinsic means belonging to the nature of things. The coherence comes from how things actually are, not from how they are perceived or thought about. Perception and thought can recognize coherence, but they do not create it. Not creating it means discovering it. Reality has structure before structure is understood. The structure governs what happens, whether anyone comprehends it or not. Physical law operates everywhere, at all times, whether known or unknown. Known or unknown makes no difference to operation. Laws function the same way in observed and in unobserved regions. The functioning is universal, not local to awareness. This universality is what makes science possible. Making science possible means providing stable object of study. If reality shifted based on observation, systematic knowledge would be impossible, but reality maintains consistency. The consistency allows accumulated understanding to be reliable. Reliable means trustworthy across contexts. What is learned in one situation applies in similar situations. The application works because underlying reality is consistent. The consistency is not enforced. It is the natural state. Natural state means how things are without intervention. Reality left to itself maintains regular patterns. The regularity is not imposed. It emerges from fundamental properties of how things are structured. How things are structured at the deepest level determines everything else. Basic properties constrain possible processes. The constraints create predictability. The predictability allows understanding to develop. Understanding developing over time shows knowledge is cumulative. Each generation builds on previous work. The building is possible because earlier discoveries remain valid. They do not become false when new information appears. They become more complete, more nuanced, better integrated with other knowledge. Better integrated with other knowledge means fitting into larger framework. Individual discoveries connect. Patterns emerge that link different domains. The connections show underlying unity despite surface diversity. Surface diversity means many different phenomena. The phenomena seem unrelated at first. Deeper investigation reveals common principles. The principles unify what seemed separate. The unification is discovery, not invention. Discovery, not invention, means the unity was real before being recognized. The common principles existed. They governed all the diverse phenomena. Understanding them shows how diversity and unity coexist. Coexist in diversity and unity describe reality at every scale. Multiplicity and coherence are both present. Neither excludes the other. The combination creates richness. Pure unity would be simple. Pure diversity would be chaos. The combination creates complexity. Creating complexity through combining unity and diversity shows a reality is structured in a particular way, not random, not rigidly uniform, organized with variation. The organization allows complexity to develop and persist. Developing and persisting both require organization. Development needs structure to build on. Persistence needs stability to maintain. Organization provides both. It creates foundation for development and framework for persistence. Framework for persistence allows things to continue. The continuation is not guaranteed by framework alone. It also requires appropriate conditions. When conditions are met and organization is present, persistence becomes possible. Becoming possible is not becoming actual. Possibility is broader than actuality. Many things are possible that never occur. Actuality is subset of possibility. What actually happens is constrained by what is possible, but not determined by possibility alone. Not determined by possibility alone means other factors matter. Conditions matter. Chance matters. History matters. The actual outcome depends on all these factors operating together. Operating together means interacting. The factors do not work in isolation. They influence each other. The interaction creates outcomes that single factors alone could not produce. Could not produce alone shows interaction is creative. Combination creates what separation lacks. This is fundamental principle. Relationship enables what isolation prevents. Connection creates new possibilities. New possibilities created by connection appear throughout nature. Atoms in isolation have certain properties. Atoms in molecules have additional properties that isolated atoms lack. The additional properties emerge from bonding. The bonding creates relationships. The relationships create emergent properties. Emergent properties are real additions. They are not hidden in components. They appear when organization exists. When organization breaks down, the properties disappear. The appearance and disappearance show the properties were genuinely emergent. Genuinely emergent means not reducible to components. Understanding components fully does not automatically reveal emergent properties. The properties require understanding organization, not just parts. Organization is separate level of reality. Separate level of reality means not merely descriptive. Organizational level is real. It has causal efficacy. Higher level properties influence lower level behavior. The influence is real causation, not mere correlation. Real causation means producing effects. Emergent properties make things happen. Temperature affects reaction rates. Beliefs affect decisions. In practice, the effects are real. They demonstrate the reality of the causes that are observed. These effects indicate that emergent properties operate as features of system organization rather than as descriptions alone. These properties correspond to how systems are structured across levels. Multiple levels can be identified within complex systems, and each level exhibits causal influence within its domain. Causal power at multiple levels means complex systems cannot be fully understood by examining any single level alone. Complete understanding requires considering all relevant levels simultaneously. The simultaneity creates challenge. Different levels use different concepts, different languages, different frameworks. Different frameworks at different levels create need for integration. Integration is not reduction. It is not showing that higher levels are really just lower levels described differently. It is showing how levels relate while maintaining their distinctness. Maintaining distinctness while showing relationship is a subtle task. The levels must remain separate to preserve their unique properties, but they must also connect to show the influence each has on the others. This connection without collapse is what integration achieves. Integration achieving connection without collapse creates comprehensive understanding. The understanding respects reality of each level while showing how levels form coherent whole. The coherence is not imposed. It is discovered. Reality is already integrated. Understanding simply recognizes the integration. Recognizing integration that already exists means discovery, not invention. The levels were always connected. The connections were real before being understood. Understanding reveals what was there. What was there before understanding means objective reality. The reality exists independently. It has its own structure. Understanding maps that structure. The mapping can be accurate or inaccurate depending on how well it corresponds to actual structure. Corresponding to actual structure is what makes understanding true. Truth is match between thought and reality. Good match means accurate understanding. Poor match means inaccurate understanding. The quality of match determines reliability of knowledge. Reliability of knowledge depends on accuracy of mapping. Accurate maps guide action effectively. Inaccurate maps mislead. The difference matters practically. Action based on accurate knowledge succeeds more often than action based on inaccurate knowledge. Succeeding more often demonstrates value of accurate knowledge. The demonstration is pragmatic. It shows through outcomes. What works reveals what is true. The working is not what makes it true. But working and truth correlate because truth describes reality, and reality constrains what works. Reality constraining what works means consequences follow from how things actually are. If understanding matches reality, predictions based on understanding will be confirmed. If understanding does not match reality, predictions will fail. The confirmation or failure tests understanding against reality. Testing understanding against reality is how knowledge improves. Predictions are made, outcomes are observed. Match between prediction and outcome supports understanding. Mismatch reveals error. The error prompts revision. The cycle continues. Understanding gradually improves through successive testing and revision. Successive testing and revision make knowledge cumulative. Each cycle adds information. Successful predictions validate understanding. Failed predictions indicate where understanding is incomplete or incorrect. Both outcomes are useful. Both contribute to improving knowledge. Improving knowledge over time is a collective project. No individual generates complete understanding. Each person contributes piece. The pieces accumulate across generations. Later generations inherit accumulated knowledge and add to it. Adding to inherited knowledge means building on foundations. The foundations were laid by earlier work. Current work extends them. The extension is possible because earlier work is reliable. If foundations were unstable, building on them would be impossible. Impossible to build on unstable foundations shows importance of validating core knowledge. Core knowledge must be tested thoroughly. When tests repeatedly confirm it, confidence increases. High confidence allows treating knowledge as foundation for further work. Treating knowledge as foundation means assuming its truth while investigating new questions. The assumption is not blind faith. It is provisional trust based on past performance. If new evidence contradicts core knowledge, the foundation must be re-examined. But absent such evidence, efficiency requires building on established knowledge rather than constantly questioning everything. Constantly questioning everything would prevent progress. Some things must be taken as established to make room for investigating new things. The establishment is not permanent. It is contingent on continued confirmation. But within its domain of validation, established knowledge can be relied upon. Relied upon means used without constant verification. Scientists do not re-verify basic physics with every experiment. They assume it holds and use it to investigate new phenomena. The assumption works because basic physics has been tested so extensively that contradictions are extremely unlikely. Extremely unlikely does not mean impossible. New evidence could appear that requires revising even well-established knowledge. The possibility remains open, but likelihood is low enough that provisional acceptance is rational. Rational acceptance based on evidence is scientific attitude. It is neither absolute certainty nor pure skepticism. It is proportional confidence. Strength of confidence matches strength of evidence. Strong evidence produces strong confidence. Weak evidence produces weak confidence. Weak confidence appropriate for speculative ideas allows exploration without commitment. Ideas can be entertained without being believed. The entertainment tests whether idea has merit. If testing supports idea, confidence increases. If testing contradicts idea, it is abandoned. Abandoning contradicted ideas is essential to knowledge growth. Holding on to ideas despite contradictory evidence prevents learning. Willingness to revise or abandon ideas when evidence demands allows knowledge to improve. In practice, improving knowledge through revision shows that understanding is dynamic rather than static. Understanding changes as evidence accumulates. These changes are not arbitrary, they are guided by evidence. The process has direction, even though specific outcomes are not predetermined. This combination of direction and openness describes how science advances, with movement toward closer correspondence with reality. The path is not fixed in advance. Many routes can lead to improved understanding, and the route that is taken depends on the questions that are asked, the methods that are developed, and the evidence that is found. Evidence found depends partly on technology. Better instruments reveal phenomena invisible to earlier observation. The revelation can transform understanding. Phenomena that were unknown become known. Theories that seemed adequate become incomplete. New theories develop to account for new observations. New theories accounting for new observations while preserving accurate predictions of old theories represent successful scientific revolution. The old theory is not shown to be completely false. It is shown to be limited. Within its domain, it remains accurate. Outside its domain, new theory is needed, new theory needed beyond domain. Of old theory shows knowledge has boundaries. Theories apply within certain ranges. Outside those ranges, different theories may be required. The requirement for different theories at different scales shows reality is more complex than any single theory captures. More complex than any single theory reflects multi-level structure of reality. Different levels may require different theoretical frameworks. The frameworks should be compatible, but need not be reducible to each other. Not reducible to each other means each level has autonomy. Lower level does not fully determine higher level. Higher level has its own principles that are not merely consequences of lower level principles. The autonomy is what makes multiple levels real rather than merely apparent. Merely apparent would mean higher levels are just convenient descriptions with no independent reality. But higher levels have causal efficacy. They produce effects that cannot be explained by lower level alone. The causal efficacy demonstrates their reality. Demonstrating reality through causal efficacy makes emergence substantive, not merely linguistic. It is not just different way of talking. It is different level of being. New properties exist at higher levels that were absent at lower levels. Absent at lower levels, but present at higher levels means genuinely novel. The novelty is not illusion. It is real addition to what exists. The addition occurs through organization. When components organize in particular ways, new properties appear. New properties appearing through organization is creative process, not creation from nothing. Creation through combination. The components are necessary but not sufficient. Organization is also necessary. When both are present, emergence occurs. Emergence occurring when organization and components combine shows both are necessary. Neither alone is sufficient. Components without organization remain isolated with only their individual properties. Organization without components has nothing to organize. Together they create what neither possesses separately. Creating what neither possesses separately is fundamental creativity. The creativity is not conscious. It is structural. It arises from how things combine. When the right components combine in the right way, new properties appear. New properties appearing from combination happen across domains. Chemical properties emerge from atomic organization. Biological properties emerge from molecular organization. Mental properties emerge from neural organization. The pattern is consistent. Organization creates properties that components lack. Components lacking properties that organization creates shows emergence is not extraction. The properties were not hidden in components waiting to be released. They appear when and only when organization exists. Before organization, they do not exist. After organization dissolves, they cease to exist. Ceasing to exist when organization dissolves demonstrates dependence on structure. The properties are real while structure persists. They are not permanent in components. They are temporary in organization. The temporariness does not reduce reality. It specifies kind of reality. Kind of reality that depends on conditions is contingent reality. Most actual reality is contingent. Very little exists necessarily. Almost everything depends on particular conditions being met. When conditions change, contingent things may cease to exist. Ceasing to exist when conditions change shows fragility of emergent properties. They are robust within their domain, but vulnerable to structural breakdown. The vulnerability is inherent. It cannot be eliminated. It is consequence of depending on organization. Depending on organization means requiring maintenance. Organization does not persist automatically. It must be maintained. Maintenance requires processes that counteract decay. The processes require energy. Without energy input, organization degrades. Organization degrading without energy input shows second law of thermodynamics operating. Entropy increases in closed systems. Order tends toward disorder. Organization is low entropy state. Maintaining it requires work. The work fights against natural tendency toward disorder. Natural tendency toward disorder is not preference. It is statistical necessity. There are more disordered states than ordered states. Random changes are more likely to move from order to disorder than from disorder to order. The likelihood creates directional tendency without intent. Without intent means not purposeful. The tendency toward disorder is not trying to destroy organization. It is simply consequence of probability. More ways to be disordered than ordered makes disorder more probable. The probability drives tendency. Tendency driven by probability operates constantly. Every organized system faces this tendency. Maintaining organization requires continuous work against it. The work must continue as long as organization persists. Stopping work allows decay. Allowing decay by stopping work shows organization is dynamic equilibrium. It appears stable, but requires constant activity to maintain stability. The stability is not static. It is maintained through continuous process. The process looks like stability from outside, but is actually constant activity. Constant activity maintaining appearance of stability describes living systems particularly well. Living organisms are not static objects, they are ongoing processes. Materials flow through them, energy flows through them. The flows maintain organization. Without flows, life ceases. Life ceasing without flows shows life is process, not object. The process organizes matter and energy in particular way. The organization creates properties characteristic of living systems. When process stops, properties disappear, even though matter remains. Matter remaining when process stops shows life is not merely matter. It is matter organized and maintained in the specific way. The organization and maintenance are what distinguish living from non-living. Same atoms can be part of living system or non-living object, depending on organization. Depending on organization means form matters more than substance. What atoms are present is less important than how they are arranged and how that arrangement is maintained. Change arrangement and properties change. The dependence on arrangement shows primacy of organization. Primacy of organization does not mean matter is irrelevant. Matter is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Organization is also necessary. Neither is reducible to the other. Both are required for emergent properties of complex systems. Complex systems requiring both matter and organization shows they have dual nature. Material and formal aspects both contribute. Ignoring either aspect produces incomplete understanding. Complete understanding requires considering both simultaneously. Considering both simultaneously creates conceptual challenge. Material aspect is easier to see and measure. Organizational aspect is more abstract, but abstract does not mean less real. Organization has causal power. It produces effects. The effects demonstrate its reality. Demonstrating reality through effects is pragmatic test. If something produces observable consequences, it is real. Emergent properties produce consequences. Higher level organization constrains lower level behavior. The constraints are observable. They validate reality of organizational level. Organizational level being real means not merely conceptual convenience. It is actual feature of how systems are structured. Systems have multiple levels. Each level is real. Each has its own properties and causal powers. Causal powers at each level operate simultaneously. Lower level enables higher level. Higher level organizes lower level. The bidirectional influence creates integrated whole. The integration is not simple addition. It is complex interaction where levels mutually constrain and enable each other. Mutual constraint and mutual enablement form circular causation in complex systems. Lower level processes provide the substrate for higher level organization, and higher level organization shapes the substrate. This reciprocal feedback loop supports ongoing system stability. Stability created by circular causation is robust yet flexible. Robust because multiple levels support each other. Flexible because adjustment at one level can propagate to other levels. The combination allows system to maintain identity while adapting to change. Maintaining identity while adapting requires balancing continuity and change. Too much continuity prevents necessary adaptation. Too much change destroys identity. The balance is dynamic. It shifts with circumstances, but some balance must exist for system to persist. Persisting through changing circumstances shows successful adaptation. Systems that adapt well continue. Systems that cannot adapt eventually fail. The differential persistence shapes what exists over time. What exists over time is selected by fit with conditions. The selection is not active choice, it is passive consequence. What fits conditions persists. What does not fit disappears. The process operates automatically. No selector is needed. Conditions themselves do the selecting. Conditions doing selecting means environment shapes what survives. The shaping is not design, it is filtering. Many variations appear. Environment filters them. What passes filter persists. What does not pass, filter disappears. The differential passage shapes population. Population shaped by differential passage through environmental filter evolves over time. The evolution is not progress toward goal. It is change in response to conditions. When conditions change, different variations are favored. The favoring shifts population composition shifting over time shows evolution in action. The shift can be gradual or rapid, depending on selection pressure and variation rate. both gradual and rapid change. In practice, neither gradual change nor rapid change is more authentic than the other. Both are real evolutionary processes. The underlying process is the same, while the rate varies with circumstances. Variation in rate produces diverse evolutionary patterns. These patterns reflect the diversity of conditions under which evolution operates, and the diversity of outcomes that result shows that evolution is context-dependent. What works in one environment may not work in another. The context dependence makes evolution flexible. Different situations produce different results, but general mechanism remains same. General mechanism remaining same across contexts shows evolution is robust principle. It applies wherever variation, inheritance, and selection exist. The applications can look very different because contexts differ, but underlying process is structurally similar. Structurally similar processes in different domains suggest evolution is general phenomenon. It is not limited to biological reproduction. Cultural evolution follows similar pattern. Technological evolution follows similar pattern. Any domain with variation, selection, and inheritance shows evolutionary dynamics. Evolutionary dynamics in multiple domains demonstrate power of general principle. The principle explains how complex adapted systems arise without design. Cumulative selection over time produces apparent design from unguided process. The appearance is striking, but the mechanism is mechanical. Mechanism being mechanical does not mean results are simple. Complexity arises from iteration. Simple process repeated many times with cumulative effects produces complex outcomes. The outcomes can be sophisticated despite simplicity of generating process. Simplicity of generating process, creating complex outcomes, shows power of iteration. Each step is small, but steps accumulate. Over many iterations, large changes emerge. The emergence is gradual, but its eventual magnitude can be substantial. Substantial magnitude, from gradual accumulation, describes many natural processes. Mountains rise grain by grain. Canyons form drop by drop. Species transform generation by generation. The pattern is consistent. Small changes over vast time produce large transformations. Large transformations from small changes show importance of time scale. What is impossible in brief span becomes inevitable in long span. Time changes what is possible. More time means more opportunity for rare events. Enough time makes rare events common. Rare events becoming common with sufficient time shifts. Probability landscape. What seems unlikely in the single instance becomes likely when instances multiply. The multiplication happens automatically over time. No special intervention is needed. Time itself provides the instances. Time providing instances means duration is resource. The resource enables exploration of possibility space. More time allows more possibilities to be tested. The testing is not systematic. It is random variation filtered by selection. But over enough time, effective solutions are likely to be found. Likely to be found does not guarantee finding. Probability is not certainty. But high probability over long time approaches inevitability in practice. What can happen probably will happen given sufficient opportunity. Sufficient opportunity provided by vast time explains apparent design in nature. Complex adapted systems appear designed, but design requires designer. No designer is necessary if sufficient time and appropriate mechanisms exist. Time plus variation plus selection can produce apparent design mechanically. In practice, producing apparent design mechanically removes need for intentional creator. The systems arise through natural process. The process is well understood. It operates according to physical law. No additional explanation is required. No additional explanation required means current understanding is sufficient. The sufficiency is not absolute. Future discoveries may refine understanding, but basic mechanism is established. Refinement will add detail, not replace foundation. Foundation remaining, while details are refined, shows cumulative nature of knowledge. Core understanding persists. Elaboration adds to it without contradicting it. The addition is compatible with foundation. The compatibility allows progressive building. Progressive building on stable foundation describes healthy knowledge growth. The growth is not random accumulation, it is systematic extension. New knowledge connects to existing knowledge. The connection creates coherent structure. Coherent structure spanning multiple domains shows unity of understanding. Different fields investigate different phenomena, but discoveries in different fields often connect. The connections reveal common principles operating across domains. In simple terms, common principles across domains indicate deeper unification. Surface differences can hide underlying similarity. Abstracting principles from specific contexts make that similarity easier to see. Given these conditions, abstract principles apply more broadly than concrete instances, which is what gives them explanatory power. A single principle can illuminate many phenomena, creating an economy of understanding. Rather than requiring separate explanations for each phenomenon, one principle can account for many. One principle explaining many shows explanatory power. The power comes from generality. General principles capture what specific instances have in common. The commonality is real similarity despite surface differences. Real similarity despite surface differences means common structure. The structure is not apparent initially. Investigation reveals it. The revelation shows diverse phenomena are variations on common theme. Variations on common theme describe much of reality. Same underlying principles generate different outcomes in different contexts. The outcomes look different, but share structural similarity. Recognizing similarity allows transferring understanding across contexts. Transferring understanding across contexts makes learning efficient. What is learned in one domain can inform understanding in another domain. The transfer is not automatic. It requires recognizing common structure. But when structure is recognized, transfer becomes possible. Transfer becoming possible creates cumulative advantage. Understanding builds on itself. Each new domain understood provides tools for understanding next domain. The accumulation accelerates learning. Accelerating learning over time shows increasing returns. Early progress is slow. As knowledge accumulates, further progress becomes easier. The ease comes from having more tools, more frameworks, more connections to build on. Having more to build on creates a stronger foundation. A stronger foundation supports more sophisticated work. What would have been difficult or impossible without that support becomes achievable once the foundation is in place. Each new achievement both extends the foundation and provides further confirmation that it can support additional work. Each extension also tests the foundation under new conditions. When an extension succeeds, it increases confidence in relying on the foundation for future. Confidence in using foundation allows ambitious projects. Without confidence in basics, only conservative increments are safe. With confidence, larger leaps become possible. The leaps still risk failure, but failure becomes informative rather than merely destructive. Informative failure guides future attempts. What failed reveals what does not work. The revelation narrows possibility space. Eliminating what does not work is progress, even when what does work is not yet found. Not yet found, but space narrowed, makes eventual success more likely. Each failure removes option. Fewer options mean higher probability of choosing correctly next time. The process converges towards solution through elimination. Elimination converging towards solution works when solution exists in possibility space. If no solution exists, elimination simply exhausts options. But when solution exists, systematic elimination will eventually find it. Eventually finding solution through systematic elimination is reliable method. The reliability comes from thoroughness. If every option is tested, correct option will be found. The finding may take time, but it is eventual. Eventual success through persistence shows value of continued effort. Single attempts may fail, but repeated attempts eventually succeed if approach is sound. The soundness of approach is critical. Unsound approach fails no matter how persistent. No matter how persistent shows persistence alone is insufficient. Method matters. Good method plus persistence succeeds. Poor method plus persistence wastes effort. The combination of good method and persistence is most effective. Most effective combination is what science embodies. Scientific method is systematic approach to gaining knowledge. The approach has proven reliable. Combined with persistent investigation, it produces cumulative understanding. Cumulative understanding over time shows science works. The working is demonstrated by practical applications. Technologies based on scientific understanding function reliably. The functioning validates the understanding they are based on. Validating understanding through practical application closes loop. Theory guides practice. Practice tests theory. Successful practice confirms theory. Failed practice reveals limitations of theory. The back and forth between theory and practice drives progress. Progress driven by interaction between theory and practice is empirical approach. Neither theory nor practice alone is sufficient. Theory without practice is speculation. Practice without theory is trial and error. Together they create systematic knowledge growth. Systematic knowledge growth accumulates over generations. Each generation inherits what previous generations discovered. Each generation adds its own discoveries. The accumulation creates increasing understanding of reality. Understanding reality means mapping its structure. The mapping improves as knowledge accumulates. Better maps enable better prediction and control. The improvement is measurable. Current understanding is demonstrably better than past understanding in many domains. Demonstrably better means objectively verifiable. The superiority is not matter of opinion. It is shown by outcomes. Better understanding produces better results. The results are public and repeatable. Repeatable results accessible to anyone show objectivity of knowledge. The knowledge is not private. It is shared. Anyone can verify claims by reproducing experiments. The reproducibility makes knowledge reliable. Reliable shared knowledge creates collective understanding. The understanding transcends individuals. It exists in community of knowers. The community preserves and extends knowledge across time and space. Preserving knowledge across time and space requires transmission. Each generation must receive what previous generations learned. The reception is not automatic. It requires active teaching and learning. Without transmission, knowledge dies with its discoverers. Knowledge dying with discoverers would mean constant restart. Each generation would begin from zero. Progress would be impossible, but transmission allows accumulation. Later generations build on earlier work. The building creates progress over time. Progress over time is not uniform. Some periods advance rapidly. Other periods advance slowly. Sometimes knowledge is lost and must be rediscovered, but general trend is accumulation. More is known now than was known previously. More known now than previously is empirical claim. It can be verified by examining historical records. Ancient texts show what was known then. Modern texts show what is known now. Comparison reveals growth. The growth is real, not illusory. Real growth, not illusory, means genuine advance. Understanding has deepened. Scope has broadened. Precision has increased. The advances are documented and verifiable. They demonstrate that knowledge accumulation is real phenomenon. Real phenomenon means actually occurring. It is not merely appearance. Knowledge genuinely increases over time when transmission and investigation continue. The increase is collective achievement. No individual could accomplish it. It requires many contributors over long period. Many contributors over long period create body of knowledge larger than any individual could create. The body is accumulated work of countless investigators. Each added piece. The pieces connect. The connections create coherent structure. Coherent structure emerging from many contributions shows knowledge is systematic. It is not random collection of facts. It is organized understanding. The organization creates relationships between pieces. The relationships multiply value of individual pieces. Multiplying value through relationships shows whole is greater than sum of parts. Individual facts are useful. Connected facts are more useful. The connections allow inference. What is known about one thing informs understanding of related things. Informing understanding of related things through connection is how knowledge extends. Direct observation is limited, but inference from known to related unknown extends reach. The extension multiplies power of observation. Power of observation multiplied by inference explains how much is known. Direct observation alone would be insufficient, but inference allows extending beyond what is directly seen. The extension must be validated, but when validation succeeds, inference becomes reliable. Reliable inference is form of reasoning. Reasoning from known to unknown is rational process. The process has rules. Following rules increases reliability. Breaking rules reduces reliability. The rules of reasoning are themselves discovered through investigation. Ideas discovered through investigation are empirically grounded. Reasoning is not arbitrary. Effective reasoning follows patterns that reliably preserve truth. These patterns can be identified by examining successful instances of reasoning, and their identification supports logic as a formal study. Logic systematizes reasoning by describing valid patterns of inference. When premises are true and an inference is valid, the conclusion must be true. Here, must refers to logical necessity. Logical necessity is different from physical necessity. Physical necessity comes from natural law. Logical necessity comes from structure of reasoning itself. Both are real forms of necessity, but they operate in different domains. Different domains of necessity show reality has multiple aspects. Physical aspect governed by natural law. Logical aspect governed by rules of inference. Both aspects are objective. Neither is merely conventional. Neither merely conventional means both are discovered, not invented. Natural laws are discovered through observation. Logical laws are discovered through reflection on reasoning. Both discoveries reveal structure independent of human choice. Independent of human choice means objective. The structure exists, whether recognized or not. Recognition is discovery of what was there. The discovery changes understanding. It does not change what is discovered. What is discovered remains what it is. This applies to physical facts and logical relations. Both are objective features of reality. Understanding them requires conforming thought to reality rather than imposing thought on reality. Conforming thought to reality is what truth requires. Truth is correspondence. Thought corresponds to reality when it accurately represents what reality is like. The accuracy is objective. It is not merely agreement or consensus. Not merely agreement means independent standard exists. Reality itself is standard. Thought conforms or fails to conform to reality. The conforming is what makes thought true. The failing is what makes it false. Making thought true or false shows truth is objective property. It is not decided by opinion. It is determined by correspondence to reality. The determination is independent of belief. Something can be true without being believed. Something can be believed without being true. Being true without being believed shows truth is independent of acceptance. Truth is not created by consensus. It is discovered. The discovery may require consensus for practical purposes, but truth itself is independent. Independent truth is what makes science possible. If truth were merely consensus, no standard for evaluating claims would exist. But reality provides standard. Claims can be tested against reality. The testing reveals which claims correspond to reality. Corresponding to reality makes claims true. Failing to correspond makes them false. The binary is clear. Intermediate cases exist, but they are cases of uncertainty about truth, not absence of truth. Truth itself is binary, even when knowledge is partial. Binary truth with partial knowledge describes epistemic situation. Reality is definite. Knowledge is often uncertain. The uncertainty is about what is true, not whether truth exists. Truth exists objectively. Knowledge of truth is often imperfect. Imperfect knowledge is normal situation. Perfect knowledge would require knowing everything, but reality is vast. Much remains unknown. The unknown does not threaten objectivity of known. What is known can be genuine knowledge even while much remains unknown. In observation, much remaining unknown shows knowledge has boundaries. The boundaries shift as investigation continues. What was unknown becomes known. The becoming requires effort. Investigation is work. The work extends boundaries. Extending boundaries of knowledge is ongoing project. The project has no completion. There is always more to know. The more is not disappointing. It is opportunity. Continued investigation continues revealing reality. Revealing reality is what investigation does. Reality is there whether investigated or not. Investigation makes it known. The making known is discovery. Discovery changes understanding, while reality remains constant. Reality remaining constant while understanding changes shows distinction between reality and knowledge of reality. They are not identical. Reality is what exists. Knowledge is grasp of what exists. The grasp can improve without reality changing. Improving grasp without reality changing is learning. Learning is change in understanding. The change can be progress or regress. Progress moves toward better correspondence. Regress moves toward worse correspondence. Direction matters. Direction mattering shows learning is not neutral. Some changes in belief are improvements, others are mistakes. The difference is objective. It depends on correspondence to reality. Better correspondence is objective improvement. Objective improvement is possible because objective standard exists. Reality itself is standard. Understanding conforms to it more or less well. The conformity is what makes improvement possible and recognizable. Recognizable improvement validates scientific progress. Progress is not mere change. It is directional change toward better understanding. The direction is toward greater correspondence with reality. The correspondence increases as investigation continues and errors are corrected. Errors corrected through investigation show self-correcting nature of science. Mistakes are made, but systematic investigation reveals them. The revelation prompts correction. The correction improves understanding. The improvement is cumulative over time. Cumulative improvement over time creates progressive understanding. The progression is not smooth, it has reversals. Errors are made. But general trend is positive. More is understood now than was understood before. The understanding is better in sense of corresponding more accurately to reality. Corresponding more accurately means fewer errors and more coverage. Early understanding was limited in scope and often wrong in detail. Modern understanding is broader in scope and more accurate in detail. The broadening and improving are measurable. They show genuine progress. Genuine progress shown by measurement validates scientific approach. The approach works. It produces results. The results are practical applications and theoretical understanding. Both demonstrate that method is sound. Sound method producing reliable results encourages continued use. The encouragement is rational. What works should continue. What fails should be revised or abandoned. The pragmatic test supplements theoretical evaluation. Theoretical evaluation examines logical coherence. Practical evaluation examines empirical adequacy. Both are necessary. Theory without practice may be logically sound but useless. Practice without theory may work but not be understood. Combination is ideal. Ideal combination requires both theory and practice to inform each other. Theory guides practice by predicting outcomes. Practice tests. Theory by trying predictions. Success confirms theory. Failure prompts revision. The interaction creates improvement in both. Improvement in both theory and practice shows their complementarity. Neither alone is sufficient for optimal results. Together they create synergy. The synergy produces better outcomes than either alone could produce. Better outcomes from combination than from either component alone demonstrates value of integration. Isolated approaches have limits. Integrated approaches transcend those limits. The transcendence is real advantage. Real advantage shown by superior results validates integrative approach. The validation is pragmatic. Integration works better. The better working is observable. It shows in outcomes. Outcomes showing advantage of integration encourage integration in other domains. The principle generalizes. Integration often produces advantages. The advantages come from combining strengths while mitigating weaknesses. Mitigating weaknesses through combination creates robustness. Single approach has vulnerabilities. Multiple approaches cover for each other. What one misses, another catches. The coverage creates more reliable total result. More reliable total result from multiple approaches shows value of pluralism. Any single perspective is partial. Multiple perspectives reveal complementary aspects, and integrating them produces a more complete picture. More complete picture from combined perspectives is comprehensive understanding. The comprehensiveness is relative, not absolute. Collectively achieving what individuals cannot shows social nature of knowledge. Knowledge is not purely individual, it is shared. The sharing creates collective understanding that exceeds individual understanding. Exceeding individual understanding means genuinely collective. The whole is greater than sum of parts. Individuals contribute pieces, but connected pieces create understanding. No individual has. The creation is emergent property of community. Complete understanding may be unattainable, but greater completeness is achievable through integration. This is a practical goal even if it cannot be fully reached. Each act of integration adds incremental completeness, and these increments accumulate over time. The accumulation is collective rather than individual. No single person achieves comprehensive understanding alone. A community of investigators can build what individuals cannot, because shared contributions combine into a larger body of understanding. In practice, community-level knowledge can be described as an organized body of understanding that is sustained through shared social practices. This body of understanding is maintained through institutions and routines that support transmission, coordination, and validation. Education transmits knowledge across generations. Publication distributes knowledge across individuals and groups. Peer review evaluates and validates knowledge claims. Together, these processes sustain collective knowledge over time.